Yesterday we needed a lot more information to graph that line, right? We needed 5 whole points. We were given the x values. We had to plug those x values into the linear equation to solve for the y values. And then we took those x's and y's and plotted them, drew our line through all those points. But now we're going to figure out how to graph these lines with only the slope and the y-intercept. On Monday, if you remember worksheet 16, we spent 20 problems identifying the slope and the y-intercept, the slope and the y-intercept, slope and the y-intercept, and so on and so on. So now we're going to figure out how we can graph these lines with just those 2 pieces of information. Here's how we're going to do that. First, obviously, we need to know what that information is. So we're going to identify M and B. If we don't know what M and B are, well, we don't have any of the information that we need to graph the line. If our slope is not already a fraction, which some of the time it will be a fraction, if it's not, we want to turn that slope into a fraction. Do you guys remember from our last unit, if we have a whole number like 2, how can we turn that 2 into a fraction? What do we put underneath that 2? A 1, right? Put it over 1. Now, if we find in step 1, when we're identifying slope, that our slope is 1/2, we don't even need to do step 2 at all. It's already a fraction. We don't want to do 1/2 over 1. It's going to make things more confusing.
Is that a T?
Put over 1. Put over 1. So if our slope is like 2, it's just 2 over 1. So now we should have an M, that's a fraction, and a B value, which is our y-intercept. We're going to make our first point right away. We're going to plot the y-intercept, or B, on the y-axis. This is going to be our starting point. For B that we identified in step 1 is 3. We find positive 3 on the y-axis and make a point. If it's negative 5, we find negative 5 on the y-axis and make a point right there. That's going to be our starting point on our graph. Now, from that point, this is really important. We're not going from the origin. We're going from the y-intercept. From that point, you're going to rise how should we phrase this? Let's see. We're going to rise the number. We're going to rise the number of spaces in your slope numerator. Remember, slope, as we've talked about, is just rise over run. Rise being on top, run being on bottom. So if our numerator in our slope is 2, from the y-intercept, we're going to rise up 2 spaces. That's what step 4 is essentially saying. I know the wording is a little bit confusing. Once we actually see the work, it's going to be a lot simpler than understanding these rules, but we're going to have these steps in place in case you ever forget. Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Jesus. Morning, Jaron. Let's add a little something in here. Thank you, sir. If we've got a positive numerator, we're going to rise up. And of course, if we have a negative numerator, what direction should we rise if we have a negative numerator? We're going to rise down. I'm going to move this down to step 3 there. Step 5. After you rise the number of spaces in your numerator, you're going to run the number of spaces in your denominator. Rise over run. So if our slope is 2 over 1, we're going to rise up 2, run over 1. If our slope is negative 3 over 5, we're going to rise down 3 and over 5. Then go ahead and add in there that we're always going to run to the right. Anyone ever play like a Super Mario game in here before?
Yeah.
A couple of us. So you know how like the levels scroll? You're always running to the right, right? Once you pass that left side of the screen, you can't go back to that side. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Most of you probably don't, but keep that in mind. We're always going to run to the right, just like we do in Super Mario. Always, always run to the right. And this is something that we've talked about. Whenever we have a negative fraction, we don't want that negative sign in the denominator. We want to throw it up in the numerator. So the direction of our rise is important, right? If our positive numerator is there, we're going to rise up. If we've got a negative numerator, we rise down. Either way, we're always going to run over to the right because our denominator will always be positive. Finally, our last step. Make your second point in that spot. well, I'll say in that new spot, and connect your 2 points with a line. Make your second point in that new spot being the result of rising and running. And we're going to connect those 2 points with a line. Go ahead and pass your glue sticks out. One glue stick for the front group, one for the back group, or the back pair. Take out your ID cards too if you have them. Hopefully if you left them at home yesterday, you brought them today. We're going to use them as rulers. You need a glue stick? Good catch. Let's start with an example. Let's do y is equal to 3 over 4x plus 2. Y is equal to 3 over 4x, or 3/4 x, plus 2. I'm going to move this down. There we go. So take a moment to glue that square in. Hold on to your second one. We'll glue that one in once we get through this example. It'll probably be on the next page for most of us. What's my first step going to be here in this process? Anyone want to volunteer to read out what my step 1 is? Yeah, Darius, go for it. Identify M and B. So in this linear equation, y is equal to 3/4 x plus 2. What is my M, or what is my slope in this equation? 3 over 4. Not just 3. 3 over 4. Okay. What's my B in this equation? Positive 2. That's my B. On Monday, that was all we did. Identify the M, identify the B. Now we're going to use that lesson and take it a step further. My second step is to do what?
Turn M into a fraction.
Do we need to do step 2 here? No. Why don't we need to do step 2? It's already a fraction. That's right. Step 3 is going to be to do what? Plot the y-intercept on the y-axis. Go ahead and give everyone a single highlighter real quick from your supply box. Doesn't matter which color. Some of y'all are going to think this is pointless, but that's okay. Doesn't matter what color. I'm going to use orange. And what I want you to do is I want you to highlight the y-axis on this graph.
Like the whole thing?
Wouldn't it be 0, 0? Good question. 0, 0 is a single point. Y-axis is an entire line. So is my y-axis going to be the vertical axis or the horizontal axis?
Diagonal.
Vertical or horizontal? vertical. One way that we can remember the y-axis is the vertical axis. Right? Here's a vertical line. And we can make a capital Y with that vertical line. See what I mean? Hopefully, maybe that helps. I don't know. There's my y-axis. So if we're going to plot b equals 2 on this y-axis, all we have to do is find positive 2 and make our dot. So we're going to find positive 2. I see it right there. Right on that orange line, we're going to make our very first point. Boom. Right there at b is equal to 2. That's my step 3. Now, step 4 is we're going to rise the number of spaces that's in our numerator. So, we saw our slope is 3 over 4. Which of those numbers is my numerator, 3 or 4? 3. So 3 is what we're going to rise, and then 4 is what we're going to run. Now, because my 3 on the top is positive, are we going to rise up or are we going to rise down? We're going to rise up. We're going to rise up 3. Then we're going to run over 4. I'm going to zoom in really close here so we can see what I'm doing. From this point, this is now our starting point. Don't go back to the origin. Start on that very first point. We're going to rise up 3. 1, 2, 3. Just like that. I know it's kind of hard because the graph squares are small, but we're going to rise up 3. And then how many spaces do we need to run again? 4. We're going to run over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, we're always running to the right, never running to the x. Or sorry, left. I don't know why I said x. Never running to the left. So I land right here at the point 4, comma 5. I'm going to make my second point right there where I land. That's my step 6. Then I'm going to take my ID card, line it up with these 2 points, and draw a nice straight line. That's all we got to do. No tables, no solving for y, none of that. We're setting our anchor point at the y-intercept. We're rising our numerator, running our denominator, making the second point, and drawing the line through those 2 points. Now don't just connect the dots, right? I shouldn't see anything like this, where the line just stops in between the 2 points. It must go past both points with arrows on the end, just to signify that this line goes on forever and ever and ever. Give me a thumbs up if you followed that process step by step, and it makes a little sense. Okay. Not even a whole lot of work to show. All we have to do is identify M and B, and then follow our steps on the actual graph. Let's do another one, and then we'll get started. Let's do y is equal to negative 3x minus 4. Y is equal to negative 3x minus 4. Get your second graph glued in. And we'll go through these steps once more. Give you guys a little time to get that set up. All right. What is my slope of this line? Negative 3 is my slope. Is negative 3 a fraction? No. So let's turn that negative 3 into a fraction by putting it over what? 1. Negative 3 over 1 is going to be my m. Okay, the reason why we want to do this is so we know how many spaces to run, right? We know that we're going to rise down 3, but with this denominator, that tells us we're going to run 1 space over. If we just, what's that?
It always has to be a fraction.
Yes. That's why our step 2 was turn m into a fraction by putting it over 1. If it's already a fraction, like we saw in the first example, we're good. But because this slope gives us 2 directions, a rise and a run, we need to see that run being a 1. If that makes sense. What's my b here? Negative 4. Now, does our b need to be a fraction? No, just the m. Because our b is a single point. The slope gives us 2 moves, a rise and a run. So we're going to rise 3. We're going to run 1. But are we going to rise up or are we going to rise down? How do we know that we're going to rise down? Because it's negative. Exactly. I'm going to give you a moment to process that before we get started on the graphic. On this graph, what am I going to plot first? What point am I going to draw first?
Negative 3.
Not negative 3. Take a look at your steps. Should be step, what is it, step 3?
Plot the y-intercept be on the y-axis.
That's right. So we're going to highlight our y-axis. Once again, going up and down. It's our vertical axis right there. And we're going to find negative 4 on that line and make a dot. Negative 4, right there, we make our first point. Now, from that point, we're going to rise down 3, and we're going to run to the right 1 space. So from that point, we're going to rise down 3. 1, 2, 3. We're going to run over 1. Down 3, over 1, And we'll make our second point right there. Now that we have 2 points, we can make a line. Line it up. Draw a nice straight line through those 2 points. Now, is this line going uphill or downhill from left to right? Downhill, which means our slope should be what? Positive or negative? Negative. Is that what we identified with our M? Yes, we had a negative slope. We're going downhill from left to right. The rise over run was 3 over 1. And we started out at -4. That's our process right there. Before we get started, is there a question that I can answer? Okay. We're going to get, go ahead. We're going to get tons of practice with this right now. If we have some time, we'll do some extra credit as well.